Welcome back to another week of my Frog RPG game. This week, I'll be working on changing the main area of the game. I know I just uploaded a video showing off the map creation just last month, but I had some ideas that I would really like to see in the game. During the creation of my first devlog, I had used an AI image as the background for my explanation of how the game will go, and that gave me the idea to use AI art to create reference images for what I had in mind and use those images to create the new area. I know, AI art is getting more and more prevalent in game development. So I headed over to the website that I was using before the owner had paused it and grabbed a bunch of reference images. Here are a few for show. I really wanted to have a river flowing right through the center of the village, with houses right by the edge surrounded by a lush forest. With those images, I started redoing the main area. I just started placing random paths for the player to follow, then lowered the terrain for the river, and then realized that my paths were far too straight and didn't look appealing, so I decided to change the paths around the river. Scale is definitely the hardest thing to keep track of when creating terrain in Unity, as I often make areas too tall or wide. So here I am raising the riverbed as it isn't a canyon. I am also changing the thickness in areas to make it look a little more natural. Another thing I was thinking about adding was a house/tower up on the hill, maybe visible through a hole in the trees. Something I really do want to add is a house coming out of a tree side, kinda like in this picture here. I'm not sure if I'll be able to recreate something like this with my skills, but it is far enough in the future that my 3D modeling skills would have improved. Here I am adding water to the river, and I decided to try using UModeler and ProBuilder, which ended up being a waste of time as I'm not very good with navigating all the options. I also added a bridge to get to the other side, and here's how the new area looks. I thought that was enough for the day, so I picked up where I left off the next morning. I began by adding Purlin noise to make the ground less flat. Then I thought of having a little area where you can get close to the water and maybe swim in it if I decide to add that. Kinda like this image here. Now I need to populate the area with trees. And there's no way I'm placing trees by hand in this area, so I decided to make a tree placer script that will place prefabs on the scene for me. This will also be useful in the portal worlds. My first thought was just placing trees on the vertices of a mesh, as the portal worlds use mesh as the floor. This way, I could just create a mesh on this terrain to place the trees on. Then I thought about how it would be very difficult to basically shrink wrap a mesh on top of the terrain where I want it, so I just converted the terrain to a mesh so I have vertices to place the trees. But with the terrain mesh, I know that there are tens of thousands of vertices, and I don't want all the vertices to contain trees. So I just used a modulus if statement which returns a remainder based on division, and simply put, halves the amount of vertices. I had also thought of another issue, and that is slopes. I wouldn't want trees placed on large sloped areas, so I need to find a way to check how steep a vertex is. The way I achieved this was by using dot product. I also had created a smaller mesh to test this on, because trying to do this on a full-scale area would take a long time, as Unity gizmos aren't the most performant at large scales. And because I'm not very mathematically inclined, trying to grasp my head around dot products was a challenge, and I was getting results that were almost promising, but dots were still showing up on the diagonals no matter the constant used for the dot product. After way too much time, I finally had my eureka moment and just decided to add two constants for the dot product to remove the dots from both diagonals. Now with that working on the small mesh, I know it will work for the terrain. Next up is making sure there's no trees placed in the water, and the way I did that was shooting a raycast up and checking to see if it hits a water mesh, and if it does, remove itself from the possible spawn points. This seems very straightforward, and there would be no reason for it not to work, but here I am, sitting here, stumped as to why not all vertices omit themselves. After over an hour of trying to figure this out, I decided to export the main mesh as an FBX file and import it into Blender to create a cleaner water mesh, and this still didn't fix it, so I decided to leave it there and go to bed for the night. The next morning, I worked on the actual placement of the trees off camera. For starters, I created a script that just holds 3 arrays of trees that will have different weights attached, and I use a random number to choose which array I should place a tree from. I also needed to add a check to see if a point lands on a specific terrain texture, and if so, remove that point from the spawn list. So the way I achieved this is the same way I checked for the water mesh, but with the addition of checking the position on the terrain's splat map. From there, I created a method to place a random tree at a point on the mesh from one of the 3 arrays, depending on another random number. I also decided to create a delete trees method, which just removes the trees, as I like to make an editor class so I can perform changes during runtime. With all that working for the most part, I ran the place trees functions with no iterations to remove any points, so it created way too many trees, as you can see. So I added a method that just removes the points in the list using the modulus equation. And here's how 10 iterations look. I should probably preface by saying that I have updated the visual effects trees and they are much more performant than they used to be, so I'll be able to use more of them before lag spikes. But as of now, without much culling, the performance of thousands of these is still low. I had implemented Unity's occlusion culling, but it isn't as performant as I would like. My thoughts for the future is to implement frustum culling and see if it performs better, and also maybe have a smaller field of view to have less trees rendered at once. I also didn't add LODs, or level of detail, to these updated trees, so that could also increase performance. I think billboards for far distances would do wonders to my struggling system. If you have anything I should try, or things you would like to see, feel free to leave a comment down below. I read every comment and look forward to new ideas. But for now, that's all I got for this week. Thank you so much for making it this far in the video, and I will see you in a couple weeks with a new video. See ya!